In recent years, the rise of shell companies has illuminated a dark side of global finance, one that has left entire countries weakened, economies drained, and ordinary citizens suffering. Shell companies, often existing only on paper, provide wealthy elites and corporations with powerful means to hide assets, avoid taxes, and evade accountability. These elusive entities function as little more than legal facades, no real employees, no physical offices, just a name and registration. Though their operations are often shadowy and obscure, the effects on the economies they impact are alarmingly real. When shell companies move into an economically vulnerable country, especially those rich in natural resources or with weak regulatory oversight, the devastation can be far-reaching and long-lasting. Imagine a developing nation, rich in oil reserves, abundant minerals, or agricultural potential. This country dreams of using its natural wealth to build infrastructure, provide healthcare, and uplift its citizens from poverty. But as soon as foreign interest in these resources grows, so does the influx of shell companies, most of them backed by powerful corporations or wealthy individuals from across the globe. These shell companies, under the guise of foreign investment, quickly seize control of key industries. Since shell companies don't have to report their profits transparently, they dodge taxes, depriving the government of essential revenue. Instead of profits benefiting local infrastructure or public services, money flows out of the country, quietly siphoned to offshore tax havens where it vanishes from public view. The impact of shell companies reaches beyond mere tax evasion. Often, they operate in ways that violate local laws or disregard environmental protections. For instance, a shell company might acquire rights to log a rainforest, dig for minerals, or drill for oil, stripping the land of resources without implementing sustainable practices. Since shell companies rarely have assets tied to the country, they avoid accountability for environmental damage. They move in, exploit natural resources, and leave environmental degradation in their wake. Polluted water, deforested landscapes, and destroyed ecosystems become the new reality for local communities, who now face health crises, loss of biodiversity, and the collapse of traditional livelihoods like fishing and farming. The political implications are equally severe. With money flowing from these entities, local elites and politicians are often seduced by the promise of kickbacks and under-the-table profits. Corruption thrives in this environment. To keep the shell companies operating freely, local officials may begin to turn a blind eye to any wrongdoing, allowing regulatory loopholes and bending or ignoring existing laws. This power structure weakens local governance, breeding distrust among citizens who feel increasingly disempowered. When people can no longer rely on the state to protect their rights or resources, resentment grows, leading to social instability, unrest, and in some cases, even violent conflict. Public infrastructure suffers as well. With shell companies evading taxes, essential public services like healthcare, education, and transportation fall into disrepair due to lack of funding. As a result, hospitals become understaffed, schools lack resources, and roads remain dilapidated. The government, now lacking revenue from what should be profitable sectors, has to cut public spending, imposing austerity on an already struggling populace. Moreover, local businesses, unable to compete with the deep-pocketed shell companies, are often driven out. Small farms, independent shops, and family-owned enterprises that once supported communities crumble, leaving citizens reliant on a few foreign-controlled industries that have little incentive to reinvest locally. But the damage doesn't end there. As shell companies continue to profit, the wealth gap widens dramatically. The few who benefit, often politicians or high-ranking officials connected to the shell companies, grow disproportionately wealthy while the average citizen sees little improvement in their quality of life. This elite class, often complicit in the exploitation, invests in luxury properties, international travel, and other symbols of affluence, widening the divide. Meanwhile, poverty, unemployment, and food insecurity intensify for the majority. Inequality, both economic and social, becomes entrenched. One of the most insidious aspects of shell companies is how difficult they are to dismantle. Since they often exist as anonymous entities, tracking down owners or proving connections to powerful corporations is a complex and costly task. Even when a government tries to reclaim control of resources or industries, shell companies may simply dissolve, re-register under different names, or relocate operations, evading accountability once again. Attempts to expose these entities can lead to threats or violence against journalists, activists, and even politicians who speak out. In this way, shell companies create a climate of fear and silence, where challenging their influence can be life-threatening. For many citizens, this reality leads to hopelessness and a sense of betrayal. They watch as foreign entities drain their country's wealth, corrupt their leaders, and degrade their environment. Protests and resistance movements often erupt, but these are met with violent crackdowns, as governments dependent on shell company money aim to maintain control. In extreme cases, social breakdown becomes inevitable, and what was once a thriving or hopeful nation is left weakened, both economically and politically, its future prospects bleak. Global attempts to address the issue of shell companies have made little headway. Regulations designed to prevent tax evasion and financial secrecy are often bypassed or watered down by lobbying from powerful corporations and wealthy individuals who benefit from these loopholes. International tax laws are notoriously complex, and enforcing them across borders is nearly impossible. As a result, shell companies continue to flourish, exploiting the same gaps in regulation and oversight that allow them to operate unchecked. The tragedy of shell companies is that they offer a stark illustration of how unchecked greed and exploitation can ravage a nation. They exploit the desires of a country seeking growth and development, then turn those dreams into nightmares, leaving a legacy of corruption, environmental ruin, and economic disparity. For meaningful change, countries would need stronger regulatory frameworks, more transparent ownership requirements, and international cooperation on tax policies. But until these changes come, the shadowy operations of shell companies will continue to erode the wealth and well-being of vulnerable nations. The devastation caused by shell companies reveals a hard truth about the global economy. Without accountability and transparency, those with the power to manipulate financial systems will continue to do so, regardless of the cost to others. The rise of shell companies isn't just a story of corporate greed. It's a modern-day tragedy where entire countries are reduced to collateral damage in the pursuit of profit.